Hello and welcome to our presentation on document design basics. You're just getting ready to redesign a document, so it's a good idea to understand some of the basic principles of what makes one document more effective than another. Some documents, like the Got Milk campaign, work really well at holding our attention and conveying information that might otherwise be sort of bland or boring. And once we understand the basic principles of document design, we can create more successful documents that will reach our audience better, stay in their memories better, and really capture their imagination. So let's talk about the basic principles of document design. First of all, it's important to know that visual information helps us remember text better than text alone. So when you add a visual, it will help us remember the text. The human eye can get overloaded really quickly. We usually have black on white as our way of reading. We have black text on white background. If you ever read something that's red text on blue background, it'll exhaust your eye very, very quickly, as you can see from the example below. Both of these are pretty far apart on the color scale, and we're going to talk about that more in a minute. But just be aware that you don't want to tire out the eye of the person who's viewing your document. Anything that's badly spelled, uses poor punctuation and bad grammar is going to make you look like a boob and will confuse people as well. So, I-morded instead of imported clementines, sandwiches spelled correctly but twice and unnecessarily, burgers spelled wrong, somebody who can't spell business doing your taxes, not actually very reassuring. Personally, I'm a grammar hound, so I go around adding the apostrophe to these kinds of signs. So let's talk about the basic principles that we've just learned and now how we apply those basic principles. First of all, we have to understand the color wheel and the grayscale as well. The things that are furthest apart create or opposing one another on the color wheel, such as red-orange and blue-green, or yellow and violet, those things have the highest contrast. So if you have a violet background and then a splotch of yellow in it, your eye will go right to that contrast where the yellow meets the violet. If you have a blue background and you put a little bit of orange on it, your eye will go to there, to that spot where the orange is, because it's going to stand out very much. Whereas if you have a blue background and a little bit of purple on it, it's not going to stand out nearly as much as the orange. I think this kind of goes without saying, but do take time to look at the color wheel and think about the different colors that you might be using to create a document. Here's just another example of the color wheel in more detail. And we're going to talk about which of these colors go well with particular types of documents. In general, you want to avoid harsh contrast. It doesn't make sense to have something that's purple with a lot of orange on it. So here we have something with a lot of blues and greens, which is the ocean, and then a little bit of peach, which is an orange, but it's a variety of orange that pulls our eyes out to the edge of this frame, and it actually gives us the perception that this view is sort of more panoramic than it actually is, because it pulls our eyes to both sides. If we only had a bar on one side, then our eye would automatically go to that side, whereas putting it on both sides helps us get a sort of feeling of the wide horizon there. We have certain associations with certain colors, and it's a good idea to have this in mind when you're thinking about redesigning your document. We tend to feel soothed by cool colors, which include the blues and greens, and we tend to feel more excited and invigorated by warm colors, which are the reds, oranges. We also have particular associations with certain colors. As it says here at the bottom, if you probably have never seen a Ford pickup truck that was pink, primarily because our associations with pink are feminine, childlike, and so on. And so, whereas Ford pickup trucks are generally geared towards an audience that is more masculine and more adult. So that's why you don't usually see the advertisements like that. Red is often seen as assertive or aggressive or sexy. Blue is generally associated with security and loyalty and so on, and you can read the list, but just bear in mind that these associations are cultural, and so the same color might have a different connotation to a different culture, and you want to bear that in mind when you think about your audience for your technical document. If you've ever wondered why hospital rooms are so depressing, you've got a lot of high contrast, like mint and pink in these curtains. You've got all these different types of wood, and you've got really harsh, glaring lighting. These things are made to be functional spaces. They're not meant to be particularly soothing. I mean, if they were designed better and with the actual audience in mind in terms of what would be most healing and soothing, they would definitely not look like this, but that's not what their goal is. They're just trying to create a space that can be easily cleaned and so on. One thing that's important to be aware of is that certainly when we look at human faces and just in general, we look for symmetry, and we find things that are symmetrical as human beings. We tend to find them across cultures to be more attractive. We look for things that are symmetrical. When things are asymmetrical, there's a contrast, and our eye is attracted to the contrast, but too much contrast is considered to be kind of unappealing. So if you think about Denzel Washington, his faces, like Leonardo DiCaprio's and so on, extraordinarily symmetrical. And we find them generally, by all accounts, fairly attractive people, whereas somebody like Dustin Hoffman in the bottom there is seen as being a character actor, and he's a very good actor, but at the same time his physical appearance is extremely uneven and asymmetrical, and that's part of his look. And so we might be attracted to the symmetrical faces in terms of what we find actually beautiful, and the asymmetrical faces are, in their own way, kind of intriguing. Symmetrical shapes are reassuring: a heart, a butterfly, square, so on. Asymmetrical shapes draw our eye more, however, and they are, in some ways, like we can put them in a place where we want to draw attention. When we looked at this slide, probably your eye may have started with the teddy bear or the shape of Texas, something that may have drawn your attention more than the symmetrical shapes. Round objects, like cool colors, tend to soothe us, whereas spiky objects, like warm colors, are stimulating. So when you're thinking about designing a document, you want to ask yourself a variety of questions. The first question, of course, is going to be who's my audience and what do they need? After that, what information am I trying to convey? What kind of visuals could I use to help me convey it? Should I use people? Is this an opportunity for humor or sex appeal? What colors fit best for this project? What shapes would be best for the project? And where do I want to put the reader's eye most? Bear in mind that our eye tends to start at the top of the page from the left-hand side and move to the right, because we read left to right by nature in our culture, and we tend to move from top to bottom. But if you put something bright red in the bottom left-hand corner of a page, that means that the eye will be drawn there immediately, especially if the page is light blue or white. And so that means that if there's information that's at the top of the page that's really important, you kind of have to drag the reader's eye back. In the next 3 slides, we're going to look at some home pages of certain websites, and we'll talk about which ones have the best design and which ones the worst, based on the principles we've just learned. So take a look at this page and see what actually is here. What you notice is that, and you've probably noticed it before if you've been out and about and ever gone into a Starbucks, that they use a combinations of browns and greens as their primary colors. These are fairly close to each other on the color wheel, and the orange is the thing that they're using to stand out. And we know from our color wheel that red is the most opposing color to the green, and we're not using a red, we're using a sort of soft orange, and that goes with the browns. You can also see that there's texture in the left-hand side of the page, and there's this sort of leaf print that gets carried around. So our eye would tend to start on this page where the contrast is with the orange cup, and then it would be dragged around and back to the iced drink at the top there, using the pattern at the side. So we start there in the middle of the page, which is a little bit different than where we might expect to start, but it takes us right around, and then you can see that at the bottom there's a little bit of blue, a little bit of contrast of some of the other things that they want us to look at, but we would likely look at them last. So in general, this is a well-designed page. By contrast to the Starbucks page, you can see that this page for weather.com is really kind of a mess. There's a lot of blue, which is the primary color they're using, and blue is a soothing color, and presumably if you're having bad weather coming your way, you would want to be soothed. So to that extent, perhaps they're thinking about their audience, but A lot of this information is jammed up in a lot of places. It's not clear where you're supposed to start on the page, and actually, the places of the highest contrast are all advertisements. It's as if the advertisers figured out that the color scheme of the page was blue, and so they used oranges and reds to get your attention to go to their ads instead of to the content of the page. You can see this at the top with Monster.com, which is orange. You can see this on the left-hand side where the photos for Wonder Photos, which is another website, have a sort of sunset orange background. And you can see it in the bottom on the right-hand side where you can see Meet Locals, which is a dating advertising site, which is in red. And none of those three spots are the place where your eye is really supposed to start on the page. So this page is actually very poorly done. This is a page for the American Pregnancy Association, and one of the things that they had to think about is their audience. You can see at the very top there's, in the same color as the background, a picture of a set of eyes. It's not really very clear what those eyes are supposed to be doing, but if you think about pregnancy, there are some people who are going to be very excited to find out that they're pregnant, and some people who are going to be very not excited to find out that they're pregnant. And so the problem with trying to design a page here is that you have two totally different audiences with totally different needs. And you can see that conflict kind of coming out here. The color schemes are okay, the shapes are fine, they're fairly soothing, but you would think that actually you might want more blues, greens, and so on than they have here, which might be more soothing to a worked up person who might be needing to be calmed, whether they're excited or whether they're a little bit anxious. On the other hand, this isn't nearly as bad as the weather page. It does have a certain, it draws our eye around the page to the various different things that you might want to look at, from the where does the weight go to the ovulation calculator and so on. The search bar is in a purple so that it stands out. And in general, this is fairly well organized, but it's not necessarily quite as good as the Starbucks page. So now that we've learned the basic principles, you're ready to get started with your document design. Good luck!